Hi, my name is Kelsey Beaston-Winners, and I decided to research the topic of the United States response to the global HIV slash AIDS epidemic. So, in order to properly understand why it's important for the United States to get more involved with the HIV epidemic, it's important to understand what exactly it is. So HIV stands for the human immunodeficiency virus, and AIDS stands for acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So HIV is caused by a virus that attacks and destroys specific cells that provide the immune system with the ability to fight off disease or infection, anything that your immune system has to fight off. And then AIDS is simply the advanced form of HIV. So in other words, it's late stage HIV. So now that we have a general idea about what exactly HIV and AIDS is, we can now understand, now it's important to understand why exactly it's important or relevant to the U.S. foreign policy. Why should the United States put more funding into something like this? So the main question is, why is it important or relevant? The first statistic that really shows as to why it's important is in 2022, about 39 million people around the globe were found to be HIV positive. This number includes all men, women, and children alike. And about 14% of them had no idea prior to testing that they were positive. And if we put that in terms of numbers in regards to the 39 million people, it would be about 5.5 million people who had no idea that they were HIV positive. So more specifically to the United States, the number would look to be more about 1.2 million. So about 1.2 million people in the United States were found to be HIV positive, and about 87% of them had already known that they were positive. But even in the United States, which is a relatively advanced country, there were about 13% that had no idea that they were HIV positive. So without testing, they wouldn't have known. And that number would equal out to be about 156,000 people, which is significant in the grand scheme of things. So this all serves to prove the importance of accessibility to testing and treatments. If these people had not gone through testing, then they would have eventually died from the effects of AIDS. So with all of this being said, it is important for the United States to continue to put funding into foreign aid for AIDS across the globe in order to fight against the overall enemy of this illness. Now that we have an idea of why it is important to look into HIV and AIDS and look into more research and why testing is important and all of that for the United States in regard to foreign policy, and to understand who are the stakeholders, who are the ones who are mainly affected by this by the United States actions with this foreign policy venture. So one of the main and obvious stakeholders is the general public. So everyone who is affected by AIDS and HIV. So anyone who goes into public places and all of that, if they have no idea that someone was HIV positive, so if someone gets into a relationship and doesn't know that the person is HIV positive, but the other one also doesn't know that they're themselves are not HIV positive, that could be detrimental. So testing is utterly important to the general public as a whole. The second group of stakeholders in this situation would be people who are HIV positive themselves. If they don't know, this could greatly affect their relationships, their family relationships, everyone who's around them. It could affect a lot of different aspects of their lives. It could be a life or death situation for them in the situation if they don't know that they have HIV. As we talked earlier, HIV affects the immune system and has a very negative effect if it goes untreated. And then the final stakeholder that I mentioned in my paper is kind of one you really have to think about, but the healthcare systems overall in nations. So in different countries across the globe, healthcare systems can be utterly affected by the United States funding for research and testing. So if there's not enough research and testing and all of that for HIV cases, and HIV were to surge, this could be detrimental for hospitals around the globe, but not just around the globe, but also in the United States as well, because it could overrun emergency rooms, it could overrun just healthcare clinics in general. So these are the three main stakeholders that are in play. So now we're going to talk about the big policy change or policy that we're specifically looking at in my paper in this research presentation. So the big thing we want to look at is, what is PEPFAR? So PEPFAR, or PEPFAR, stands for the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. So this was originally introduced by George W. Bush in 2003. It has been praised over the past 20 years for contribution to the HIV/AIDS community. It's one of the biggest, or one of the Bush administration's best contributions to U.S. foreign policy yet, in my opinion. And this could be seen over the years with the many positives that came out of this. So fast forward to today, as I said, this had been pretty prominent over the past 20 years. The Biden administration supports renewing it. And back in 2023, it was up for renewal. So it goes on a 5-year loop. So every 5 years it gets renewed. Every 5 years it would get renewed, assuming that Congress was okay with it, and they would okay the funding and everything to make sure that it was okay to go, and then they'd approve it for the next 5 years. Well, the problem came about in about, I believe it was October of 2023. Congress couldn't come to an agreement, and there was some disapproval on the Republican side, but they decided that they did not want to renew it, so it did not get renewed. This means that the amount of aid sent to foreign nations for HIV/AIDS research and treatments will be determined now on a year-to-year basis rather than every 5 years. Finally, as for my policy change, I think the PEPFAR is a pretty great piece of U.S. foreign policy. I believe that it as a whole is a good thing. I think that PEPFAR should be renewed, although Congress kept putting it off. I believe that they should come together and renew it. I believe it should be on at least a 5-year cycle, if not longer. And President Biden should strongly urge Congress to pass it. I believe that he should make this a priority on his list of things to do. I believe that he should strongly urge Congress to pass it and emphasize it. One of the things I had mentioned in my paper that I don't have written down here was the fact that I believe that he should bring in foreign diplomats from some of these nations, such as nations in Africa. Maybe he should bring some of the higher ups there, some of their Department of Health leaders, to come in and talk about how the United States aid has been helping the HIV/AIDS battle, per se, in their countries, and how the funding that the United States is sending to them is getting used truly for the HIV/AIDS research and treatment. So, on top of the major consequences, like if funding were to change every year, it could have major consequences on the research that is done, could have some major setbacks, major drawbacks. But in addition to this, it could also hinder diplomatic relations with these nations, such as I mentioned, nations in Africa. So it could also have diplomatic negative consequences as well. And here are my sources. Thank you for listening.